It was one of those perfect Saturday mornings where the sun felt warm but not too hot, and there was just enough breeze to make everything feel fresh. David had been planning this garage sale for weeks now. His mom had passed away 6 months ago, and going through her things had been harder than he expected. Every box held a memory, every piece of furniture told a story. But his apartment was bursting at the seams, and he knew his mom would have wanted her things to go to people who'd actually use them. Living in Meadowbrook Estates for 3 years, David had always been the quiet neighbor. The guy who waved hello, kept his lawn neat, and never caused any trouble. He worked long hours and valued his privacy, so he never really got involved in neighborhood drama. And there was plenty of drama, from what he'd heard at the mailbox. Before setting up the sale, David had done his homework. He'd pulled up the HOA guidelines on his laptop, read through all 15 pages of rules and regulations, and found the section about garage sales. It was pretty clear. You could have one as long as you posted a notice on the community board 48 hours in advance. So that's exactly what he did. Wednesday evening, he'd walked over to the clubhouse and pinned up his notice, following every rule to the letter. By 8 in the morning on Saturday, David was hauling boxes out to his driveway. His mom had been a collector of beautiful things. There were vintage mixing bowls in colors you just don't see anymore, a solid oak coffee table his dad had refinished in the 70s, stacks of classic novels, and kitchen gadgets that actually worked better than the new stuff. He arranged everything neatly, put price stickers on items, and even set up a folding table with a cash box. The first customer showed up around 9. An older couple looking for furniture practically squealed when they saw the coffee table. A young mom with 2 kids in tow found a whole set of Dr. Seuss books for her daughter. David found himself smiling as he watched his mom's things find new homes. This was exactly what she would have wanted. No waste, just good stuff going to people who appreciated it. Around 10, Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down stopped by and bought a set of mixing bowls. She told David they reminded her of her own mother's kitchen. They chatted for a few minutes about recipes and memories. It felt good, normal, pleasant. Then at exactly 10:30, everything changed. David noticed her first as a figure marching across the street with purpose. Patricia Hendricks. He'd seen her around the neighborhood, usually scowling at something or taking photos of people's houses with her phone. Other neighbors had warned him about her in hushed conversations. She was the self-appointed neighborhood watch, the HOA enforcer, the person everyone tried to avoid. She was probably in her late 50s, with short blonde hair that looked like it got cut at the same salon every 3 weeks like clockwork. She wore pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt, like she was about to go golfing at a country club. But it was her expression that caught David's attention. Pure anger. Her jaw was set, her eyes were narrowed, and she was walking like a woman on a mission. "Excuse me," she said loudly, not even trying to be polite. A couple who had been browsing the furniture quickly moved away, sensing trouble. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" David took a breath and put on his best customer service smile. "Good morning. I'm having a garage sale. Is there something I can help you find?" "Help me find?" Patricia's voice went up an octave. "You can help me by shutting this whole operation down right now. This is a violation of multiple HOA regulations." David kept his voice calm and friendly. "Actually, I checked the guidelines pretty carefully. Garage sales are allowed with 48 hours notice. I posted the notice on Wednesday evening. Would you like to see it?" He pulled out his phone and showed her the photo he'd taken of his notice on the community board, complete with the date and timestamp. He'd learned long ago that documentation was everything. Patricia barely glanced at the phone. "I don't care what some piece of paper says. This is not the kind of activity we allow in this neighborhood. It looks trashy. It brings in strangers. And frankly, it brings down everyone's property values." A young couple who had been looking at the books quietly put them down and left. David felt a flash of frustration but pushed it down. "I understand your concerns, but according to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws..." "I don't need you to quote the bylaws at me," Patricia snapped. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I've been on the HOA board for 12 years. I think I know the rules better than some newcomer who's barely been here 5 minutes. 3 years. David corrected gently. "Whatever. The point is, this ends now. Pack it up." David looked at her carefully. He'd dealt with difficult people before. Lots of them. You learned pretty quickly that staying calm and factual was the only way forward. Ma'am, I'm not trying to cause any problems. I followed all the rules. If you'd like to file a formal complaint with the HOA board, that's absolutely your right. But I have permission to continue my sale today. Patricia's face turned red, actually red like a cartoon character. Permission? You don't have my permission, and that's what matters in this neighborhood. I'm calling the police. She pulled out her phone and started dialing before David could even respond. He stood there holding a box of his mom's old cookbooks, watching this woman report him like he was some kind of criminal. A few neighbors had come out of their houses now, watching the scene from their yards but not coming closer. Nobody wanted to get involved with Patricia. David heard her talking to the emergency dispatcher. Yes, I need officers to come to Meadowbrook Estates immediately. There's suspicious commercial activity happening on Willow Creek Drive. Someone is selling items that may be stolen property. Yes, I'll wait here. Stolen property. She'd actually said stolen property. David felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry would only make things worse. He set down the box of cookbooks and pulled out his phone to take photos of everything. The setup, the prices, Patricia on her phone. If this was going to become a thing, he wanted documentation. Taking pictures of me now? Patricia said loudly. That's harassment. I'm adding that to my police report. Just documenting the situation, David said quietly. For everyone's protection. She huffed and walked back to her lawn, standing there with her arms crossed like a sentinel, guarding the neighborhood from the terrible threat of used furniture and vintage kitchenware. David saw curtains moving in windows up and down the street. Everyone was watching, but nobody was helping. That told him everything he needed to know about Patricia's reign over this neighborhood. The remaining customers had drifted away. David stood in his driveway, surrounded by his mother's belongings, waiting for the police to arrive because he'd committed the terrible crime of having a legal garage sale. He thought about his mom and how she would have handled this. She probably would have offered Patricia some lemonade and killed her with kindness. But David wasn't feeling particularly kind right now. He was feeling tired of bullies, tired of people who thought rules only applied to everyone else. He could hear the sirens in the distance getting closer. Patricia stood on her lawn, that triumphant smirk on her face, probably already planning how she'd tell this story to everyone who'd listen. The troublemaker from Willow Creek Drive, finally getting what he deserved. What Patricia didn't know, what nobody in this neighborhood knew, was that David dealt with people like her every single day. It was literally part of his job, and he was very, very good at his job. The police car turned onto the street and David took a deep breath. Here we go, he thought. Let's see how this plays out. The police cruiser pulled up slowly and David watched as two officers stepped out. The first one was older, probably in his late 40s, with graying hair and the kind of steady walk that came from years on the job. His name tag read Officer Davis. The second officer was younger, maybe late 20s, and he looked like he was still figuring out how to carry all that equipment on his belt comfortably. Patricia practically sprinted across the street before they'd even closed their car doors. David could hear her voice from his driveway, high-pitched and urgent, talking about suspicious activity and how she'd been watching all morning and something just didn't feel right about the whole situation. Officer Davis held up a hand, polite but firm. Ma'am, we'll handle this. Please wait over there while we assess the situation. She huffed but stepped back, arms still crossed, watching every move like a hawk. David stayed where he was, hands visible, relaxed. He knew how this worked. Stay calm, be respectful, don't make sudden movements. The two officers approached his driveway and Officer Davis spoke first. Good morning, sir. We got a call about some concerns regarding this sale. Can I see some identification? Of course, David said. He moved slowly, reaching for his back pocket. My wallet's right here. Just grabbing it now. Appreciate that, Officer Davis said, his tone professional but not unfriendly. David handed over his driver's license, and the younger officer pulled out a notepad. Officer Davis studied the license, then looked at David, then back at the license. So you live here? At this address? Davis asked. Yes, sir. 3 years now. This is all stuff from my mom's estate. She passed away 6 months ago, and I've been going through her things. David gestured to the driveway. Everything here belonged to her. The younger officer was writing everything down. Do you have any documentation? The HOA permit for the sale? Absolutely. David pulled up the photos on his phone again. Here's the notice I posted Wednesday evening. And here's Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws that permits garage sales with 48 hours notice. Officer Davis took the phone, scrolling through the images. David could see his expression soften slightly. The younger officer leaned in to look too. Looks pretty straightforward, the younger one said quietly. Patricia's voice cut across the lawn. Are you actually going to do your jobs? Check those items. He could have stolen all of that. How do we know it belonged to his mother? Officer Davis's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained professional. He handed the phone back to David. Do you have any documentation proving these items belong to your mother? David had anticipated this. He pulled out a folder from the card table. Inside were copies of his mother's will, the estate inventory his lawyer had prepared, and even some old photos of his parents' house showing the furniture in the background. Here's the estate documentation. My lawyer helped me with the inventory, and these photos show some of the furniture in my parents' house from over the years. Officer Davis flipped through the papers carefully. He showed a few pages to his partner. David could see the moment they both realized this was exactly what it looked like. A guy having a legal garage sale on a Saturday morning. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience. Everything appears to be in order here. You have every right to continue your sale. Officers, Patricia was marching back over despite being told to wait. This is unacceptable. I know suspicious activity when I see it. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I know every single person here, and I know when something isn't right. Officer Davis turned to her, his patience clearly wearing thin. Ma'am, we've reviewed the situation. Everything is legal and documented. There's no issue here. No issue. Look at this mess. It's bringing down the whole neighborhood. And he's being belligerent. He's been rude to me from the start, refusing to follow simple instructions. David kept his mouth shut. Let her talk. Let the officers see who they were really dealing with. Ma'am, having a garage sale isn't illegal. He has proper permission from his HOA. I don't care about permission. Patricia's voice was getting louder. I'm the HOA enforcement coordinator. I've been handling these issues for over a decade. If I say this needs to shut down, it needs to shut down. The younger officer glanced at David, and there was something in that look. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. This probably wasn't his first time dealing with an overzealous neighborhood busybody. Officer Davis was reaching for his radio when David made a decision. He'd tried to keep things separate, tried to have a normal, quiet Saturday like a normal person. But Patricia wasn't going to let this go, and these officers were wasting their time because of a false report. Officer Davis, David said quietly, I have another form of ID in my wallet. Might clear some things up. Davis paused, his eyebrows raising slightly. Okay? David pulled out his wallet again and flipped it open to show his credentials. The ID card was right there next to his driver's license. He'd been carrying it for so long it was second nature. Officer Davis's eyes went wide. Actually wide. He leaned in closer, studying the ID, then looked up at David with an expression of complete surprise. Lieutenant Thompson? He said, his voice different now. You're with the DA's Criminal Investigation Division? The younger officer's pen stopped moving. He stared at David like he'd just announced he was secretly Batman. David shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed. Yeah, I work out of the downtown office. Been there about 8 years now. Wait, the younger officer said. Lieutenant David Thompson? You did that training seminar last spring on crime scene documentation. I was there. Front row. David tried to remember. There'd been about 50 officers at that training. The one at the conference center? Yeah, you talked about that serial burglary case from 2 years ago. How you guys tracked the suspect through his receipts. That was brilliant. Officer Davis was shaking his head, a small smile forming. I've heard about you from the guys at the station. You're the one who cracked the Richardson fraud case, right? That whole thing with the construction contracts? Part of a team effort, David said, because it always was. But yeah, that was one of mine. Patricia had gone quiet for about 30 seconds, which might have been a record. Now she was pushing forward again, her face somehow even redder than before. This is ridiculous, she shouted. I don't care who he claims to be. This is clearly an abuse of power. He's using his position to intimidate me, to intimidate this entire neighborhood. This is corruption! Officer Davis turned to her, and his tone had changed. It was still professional, but there was steel in it now. Ma'am, Lieutenant Thompson isn't using his position for anything. We responded to your call. We investigated. Everything is legal. That's the end of it. No, it's not the end of it. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling your supervisor. I'm calling the police chief. I'm calling the mayor if I have to. This is an abuse of power and I won't stand for it. He's probably been using his badge to get away with all kinds of violations. The younger officer looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. Officer Davis just sighed. The kind of deep sigh that came from dealing with one too many difficult calls on a Saturday morning. Ma'am, you're free to file any complaints you want through the proper channels, but making false reports to 911 is a crime itself. I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't back up. Patricia pointed a shaking finger at all of them. You're all in on it. This whole thing is corrupt. Well, I'm not scared. I know my rights. I know the law. And I know when something isn't right. She stormed back to her house, phone already to her ear, presumably calling someone to complain about the terrible injustice of a man having a legal garage sale. Officer Davis rubbed his forehead. Lieutenant, I am so sorry about this. Complete waste of your time and ours. Not your fault, David said. You guys were just doing your job. I appreciate you coming out. The younger officer was still looking starstruck. Can I just say it's an honor, sir. Your work on the Riverside case last year was talked about at the academy. They use it as a teaching example now. David felt his face getting warm. He'd never been great with praise. Just doing the job, same as you guys. They talked for a few more minutes, the conversation shifting from official business to shop talk. Officer Davis knew some of the detectives David worked with. The younger officer asked a few questions about investigative procedures. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like colleagues chatting at a coffee shop. Then Patricia's voice rang out from her porch. I see you. I'm documenting all of this. This whole corrupt conversation. All three of them looked over. She was taking photos with her phone, aiming it at them like it was some kind of weapon. Officer Davis shook his head. Good luck with your neighbor, Lieutenant. Thanks. Something tells me I'm going to need it. As the officers drove away, David looked at the garage sale items still spread across his driveway. The morning had gone completely sideways. A few brave neighbors were starting to drift back over, curiosity winning out over fear of Patricia. David sat down in one of his mom's old folding chairs and took a deep breath. He'd wanted a quiet Saturday. Instead, he'd just made an enemy. And from what he'd heard about Patricia, she wasn't the type to let things go. David finished his garage sale around 3 that afternoon. Most of his mom's things had found new homes, and he'd made enough money to donate to the animal shelter she'd always supported. As he was packing up the last few boxes, his neighbor from next door, an older man named Frank, wandered over. That was quite a show this morning, Frank said, keeping his voice low and glancing toward Patricia's house. Yeah, wasn't exactly what I had planned, David replied. Folding up the card table, Frank helped him carry a box to the garage. Listen, I probably should have said something earlier. We all should have. But Patricia, He trailed off, searching for the right words. She's made life difficult for a lot of people around here. Most folks just try to stay off her radar. I'm getting that impression. 3 families have moved out in the last 5 years because of her. Good people. She'd find something wrong with everything they did. Called the city on one family because their grass was a 1/4 inch too long. Reported another family's teenager for parking on the street. Just constant complaints until they couldn't take it anymore. David closed the garage door and leaned against it. Why doesn't anyone push back? The HOA board? Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. The board? Half of them are terrified of her. She threatens lawsuits like some people say good morning. The other half are just tired and don't want the headache. It's easier to let her have her way than deal with the drama. That's a pretty miserable way to live, and tell me about it. My wife and I have thought about moving, but we've been here 23 years. This is our home. Why should we leave because one person makes everyone's life difficult? They talked for a few more minutes before Frank headed back to his house. David went inside, made himself some dinner, and tried to put the whole thing behind him. Tomorrow was Sunday. He had plans to do absolutely nothing, and that sounded perfect, but Patricia had other plans. Monday morning, David's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the HOA board marked urgent. Apparently, Patricia had filed a formal complaint about his garage sale, his aggressive behavior toward a board member, and his abuse of his position as a law enforcement officer to intimidate residents. The email was 3 pages long, single-spaced, detailing every perceived violation she could think of. David deleted it and went to work. Tuesday, another email. This one was sent to the entire neighborhood mailing list. Patricia had written what could only be described as a manifesto about the dangerous element that had infiltrated their peaceful community. She didn't use David's name, but she didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. She warned neighbors to be careful, to document everything, to report any suspicious activity. David's phone started buzzing with text messages from neighbors he barely knew. Some were apologetic. Others were supportive. A few asked if he was okay. He replied to the kind ones with brief thanks and ignored the rest. Wednesday brought a knock on his door at 7 in the morning. David answered it to find 2 police officers standing on his porch. Different officers this time. They looked embarrassed before they even opened their mouths. "Lieutenant Thompson, we're sorry to bother you," the female officer said. "We got a call about a noise complaint." Loud music at 6 in the morning? David hadn't even been awake at 6 in the morning. "I can show you my security camera footage if you want." "I was still asleep then." "That won't be necessary, sir. We figured it was probably bogus, but we have to respond to every call." "I understand. Let me guess. Patricia called it in?" The officers exchanged glances. "We can't really say, but..." The male officer shrugged. "Word travels at the station. Everyone knows about Saturday. We're really sorry you're dealing with this." That afternoon, David came home to find a citation on his door. Patricia had called the city's code enforcement about his lawn being too high. David looked at his lawn. He'd mowed it 4 days ago. It was perfectly fine. He took photos from every angle with his phone, making sure to capture the date and timestamp, then called the code enforcement office. The woman on the phone apologized profusely. "Mr. Thompson, I'm looking at the photos the inspector took. Your lawn is absolutely within compliance. In fact, it's one of the nicer ones I've seen. I'm voiding this citation immediately. I'm also noting in our system that this address seems to be the target of frivolous complaints. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Between you and me, we get a lot of calls from your neighborhood. Same person, different addresses. We've started flagging them." David hung up and stood in his kitchen, looking out the window at Patricia's house. He could see her in her front yard, taking photos of his house with her phone. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Thursday morning brought more emails to the neighborhood list. Patricia had apparently decided that David's presence in the community was a threat to property values and safety. She was encouraging neighbors to attend the next HOA meeting to discuss problematic residents and potential bylaw changes that would give the board more enforcement. David's doorbell rang that evening. He looked through the peephole and saw his neighbor from 3 houses down, a woman in her 40s named Jennifer. He'd talked to her a few times at the mailbox but didn't know her well. He opened the door. "Hi, Jennifer." "Hi, David. I'm sorry to bother you. Can I come in for a minute?" He let her in and she sat on his couch looking nervous. "I wanted to talk to you about Patricia. I know what she's doing to you and I needed to tell you my story." Jennifer had moved to Meadowbrook Estates 7 years ago with her husband and 2 kids. Within a month, Patricia had started complaining about their trampoline in the backyard. Then it was their kids' bikes on the driveway. Then it was their Christmas decorations being up too early. The complaints never stopped. "She called CPS on us," Jennifer said quietly. "Can you believe that?" She told them our kids were unsupervised and playing outside at inappropriate hours. It was 6 in the evening. In summer, they were literally playing in our fenced backyard while we made dinner. That's insane. The CPS worker could tell immediately it was a bogus call, but we still had to go through the whole investigation. It was humiliating and scary, and my kids didn't understand why strangers were asking them questions about whether Mommy and Daddy took care of them. Jennifer wiped her eyes. "I'm telling you this because I want you to know what she's capable of. She doesn't just make life inconvenient. She tries to destroy people. My husband wanted to move, but I refused. I wasn't going to let her win. How did you make it stop?" I documented everything. Every complaint, every phone call, every accusation. I built a file that was 3 inches thick. Then I threatened to sue her for harassment. My brother-in-law is a lawyer, and he wrote up the paperwork. She backed off after that, but she never apologized. She just moved on to her next target. After Jennifer left, David sat in his living room in the dark thinking. He'd dealt with criminals his entire career. People who'd done terrible things without remorse. But Patricia was a different kind of problem. She operated within the system, weaponizing rules and regulations and community resources against people she didn't like. Friday afternoon, David got a call from his sergeant at work. "Hey, Lieutenant. Got something weird I wanted to give you a heads up about. Someone filed a complaint with Internal Affairs about you, claiming you're using your badge to harass and intimidate a civilian." David closed his eyes. Of course she did. "I've already talked to IA. They pulled the reports from Saturday's garage sale incident. Everything's documented. The complaint is completely baseless and they're not opening an investigation. But I wanted you to know it happened. Thanks for the call. Is this about that HOA lady? The one from Saturday?" "Yeah," his sergeant laughed, but it was sympathetic. "Man, I've got a crazy HOA board member in my neighborhood too. Different kind of crazy though. This lady sounds next level. She's something." That night, David sat at his kitchen table and opened his laptop. He created a new folder and labeled it Patricia. Inside, he started organizing everything. The HOA complaint emails, screenshots of her neighborhood list messages, the code enforcement citation that had been voided, the dates and times of the bogus police calls, Jennifer's story, which he typed up from memory with her permission. He wasn't doing this because he wanted revenge. He was doing it because he'd learned a long time ago that bullies only stopped when someone stood up to them, with evidence they couldn't deny. Patricia had spent years terrorizing this neighborhood because nobody had ever held her accountable. David opened a new document and started typing. Not a complaint, not a threat, just a timeline of events, factual and unemotional. Dates, times, incidents, outcomes. The kind of report he'd write for any case that crossed his desk. His phone buzzed. Another email from Patricia to the neighborhood list. This one claimed she'd seen suspicious vehicles coming and going from his house at odd hours. The suspicious vehicles were his colleagues stopping by after work. David added it to the file and kept typing. Patricia thought she was the only one who knew how to document things. She thought she was untouchable because she'd gotten away with this behavior for so long. She was wrong on both counts. The weekend came and went quietly, which made David nervous. In his experience, quiet didn't mean the storm was over. It usually meant someone was planning their next move. He was right. Monday morning, David was at his desk reviewing case files when his personal cell phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him he should. "Lieutenant Thompson," he answered. "David, hi. This is Christine Park. I'm on the HOA board at Meadowbrook Estates. Do you have a minute?" David leaned back in his chair. "Sure, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to call you personally about the situation with Patricia. I've been getting your emails forwarded to me, and honestly, I'm horrified. The board met yesterday, and we need to talk about what's been happening. I appreciate that. Can I be completely honest with you?" Christine's voice dropped lower. "The board has been afraid of Patricia for years. She threatens lawsuits constantly. She shows up at meetings with printed copies of bylaws and city codes. She's exhausting, and most of us have full-time jobs and families. It's been easier to just let her do her thing. I get it, but that's created a pretty toxic environment. I know, and I'm ashamed we let it go on this long. But what she's doing to you is beyond anything I've seen before. The emails to the neighborhood, the police calls, the code enforcement complaints. It's harassment, plain and simple." David didn't say anything. He wanted to hear where this was going. "We're having an emergency board meeting Thursday night. Can you attend? I think it's time we address this head-on. I'll be there." Tuesday brought another police visit. This time it was Officer Davis from the original garage sale call. He looked genuinely angry when David opened the door. "Lieutenant, I'm sorry. We got another call. This time she's claiming your guests were threatening her." "My guests?" "Yeah. She says there were 4 men at your house last night around 8 p.m. and they were yelling threats at her across the street." David almost laughed. "Those were my colleagues from work. We had a case review meeting here because the office conference room was being repainted. We ordered pizza and worked until about 10. Nobody went outside. Nobody even looked out the window at her house." Officer Davis rubbed his face. "I figured it was something like that. But here's the problem. This is the 4th false report she's filed in 2 weeks. The department is starting to take notice. Worry, what does that mean? It means if she keeps filing false reports, we're going to have to do something about it. We can't keep sending officers out on calls we know are bogus. It's a waste of resources and it's actually illegal." After Officer Davis left, David added the incident to his growing file. He now had documentation of 4 separate false police reports, all made within 14 days. Each one had been investigated and found to be without merit. That was starting to look like a pattern, and patterns were something David was very good at recognizing. Wednesday afternoon, David got home from work to find his mailbox hanging open. Inside was a letter from the city, official-looking with a government seal. His stomach dropped as he opened it. It was from the Department of Health and Human Services. Someone had filed a complaint claiming his property was a health hazard, with accusations of pest infestation, improper waste disposal, and unsanitary conditions. An inspector was scheduled to visit Friday morning. David stood in his driveway looking at his perfectly maintained house and lawn. His trash cans were stored neatly in the garage. He had a lawn service that came every week. His house was probably cleaner than most hotels. He pulled out his phone and took dozens of photos. Every room, every corner, the garage, the trash cans, the yard from multiple angles. Then he called the Department of Health number on the letter. "I received a notice about an inspection," he told the woman who answered. "I'm calling to confirm the appointment and to ask about the complaint that was filed." "Let me pull that up." "Thompson, Willow Creek Drive? Okay, I see it here. The complaint was filed anonymously, claiming multiple violations." "Anonymously? Is that normal?" "We do accept anonymous complaints, yes. But between you and me, sir, we've been getting a lot of anonymous complaints from your neighborhood lately, all from the same number. Most of them have turned out to be false." "What happens if this inspection shows no violations?" "Then we note it in our system, and if we continue getting false complaints from the same source, we can take action against the person filing them." David thanked her and hung up. Patricia was getting bolder, or more desperate. He wasn't sure which, but neither was good. That evening, Frank knocked on his door. "Hey, David, got a minute?" They sat on David's back porch and Frank handed him a folder. "Jennifer and I have been talking to other neighbors. We put this together for you." Inside the folder were written statements from 6 different families. Each one detailed their experiences with Patricia over the years. False complaints to various city departments, harassment, threats of legal action. One family had spent $3,000 on lawyer fees defending themselves against a completely baseless HOA violation that Patricia had pushed the board to enforce. "Why are you all doing this?" David asked, though he was grateful. "Because we're tired, and because you're the first person who might actually be able to do something about it. You know how the system works. You know what documentation matters. The rest of us just suffered through it and hoped she'd eventually move or leave us alone. She doesn't leave people alone, though, does she? No, she just rotates targets. Once she's made one family's life miserable enough, she moves on to the next. You're just her current focus." Thursday evening, David walked into the HOA board meeting. The community center room was packed, which was apparently unusual. Word had gotten around that something big was happening. Patricia sat in the front row, a stack of papers in her lap, looking confident and righteous. When she saw David walk in, her expression hardened. Christine called the meeting to order and got through the usual business quickly. Then she took a deep breath. "We have a serious matter to discuss tonight. Over the past 2 weeks, there have been multiple complaints filed by Patricia regarding David Thompson and his alleged violations of HOA rules and community standards." Patricia sat up straighter, smiling. "However," Christine continued, "we've also received complaints from multiple residents about harassment, intimidation, and abuse of the complaint process." The smile fell off Patricia's face. For the next hour, the board reviewed everything. David's garage sale documentation, showing full compliance with HOA rules, the 4 false police reports, the voided code enforcement citation, the health department complaint, the emails to the neighborhood list, the statements from 6 different families detailing years of similar behavior. Patricia interrupted constantly, her voice getting louder each time. She accused David of using his position to manufacture evidence. She claimed the other neighbors were lying because he'd intimidated them. She threatened to sue the board, the HOA, and David personally. "Patricia," Christine said firmly, "you need to stop talking. You've had your time to speak. These accusations against Mr. Thompson are serious, but every single one has been investigated by the appropriate authorities and found to be false. That's because he's a cop. They're protecting their own. He's not a cop. He's a detective with the district attorney's office, which is completely different. And the code enforcement officer who voided your lawn citation? She's never met him. The health department inspector? Same thing. These are independent city departments that found no violations because there were no violations. David watched Patricia's face turn red, then almost purple. She stood up, grabbed her papers, and shouted, "This is a kangaroo court. You're all corrupt. I'll have all of you removed from the board." She stormed toward the door, then turned back and pointed at David. "This isn't over. You think you can come into my neighborhood and push me around? I know people. I have connections. You're going to regret this." The room went silent. Everyone stared at her. David pulled out his phone and very deliberately started recording. "I'm sorry," he said calmly. "Could you repeat that? I want to make sure I got it clearly." Patricia's eyes went wide as she realized what she'd just done. She'd threatened a law enforcement officer in front of 40 witnesses while being recorded. She turned and ran out of the room. Literally ran. Christine looked at David. "Did she just threaten a police officer?" "Yeah, that's a crime." David stopped the recording and saved it to his cloud storage immediately. The board voted unanimously to remove Patricia from all HOA positions and to send her a formal cease and desist letter regarding her harassment of residents. If she continued, they would pursue legal action. David drove home that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was coming to an end. But he'd been doing this job long enough to know that people like Patricia didn't go down quietly. If she was willing to make threats in front of witnesses, who knew what she'd do next? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number as he pulled into his driveway. It was a photo of his house taken from across the street. No message, just the photo. David saved it to his file and added it to the documentation. Patricia was spiraling, and when people spiraled, they made mistakes. Big ones. He just needed to be patient and let her make them. Friday morning started like any other day. David got up at 6, made coffee, and checked his security camera footage like he'd been doing every morning for the past 2 weeks. Nothing unusual. Patricia's house across the street was quiet. The health inspector showed up at 9, a tired-looking man in his 50s carrying a clipboard. David had everything ready for him. The house was spotless, though it always was. Every room was accessible. All the documentation was organized on the kitchen table. The inspection took 20 minutes. The inspector walked through each room, checked the trash area, examined the yard, and took notes. When he was done, he sat at David's kitchen table and filled out his report. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be straight with you. This is one of the cleanest properties I've inspected in months. No violations. Not even minor ones. Whoever filed this complaint was either mistaken or being malicious. I have a pretty good idea which one it is," David said. The inspector nodded knowingly. "Yeah, we've been getting a lot of calls from this neighborhood. Same pattern every time. Anonymous complaint turns out to be nothing. It's a waste of city resources." He handed David a copy of the report. "You're all clear. And I'm flagging this address in our system, so if we get future complaints, we'll know the history." After the inspector left, David sat at his kitchen table with his coffee and his growing file of documentation. He'd been patient. He'd followed every rule. He'd let Patricia make her mistakes while he carefully documented everything. But something told him this wasn't over yet. He was right. Saturday afternoon, David was mowing his lawn when 2 different police officers pulled up. Not Officer Davis this time. These were detectives, and they looked serious. David turned off the mower and walked over. "Can I help you?" The older detective, a woman with sharp eyes, showed her badge. "Detective Rodriguez." "This is Detective Kim. Are you Lieutenant David Thompson?" "Yes. We need to talk to you about a complaint that was filed. Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" David's stomach dropped. This was different. Detectives didn't show up for noise complaints or lawn violations. They let him inside, and all 3 sat in his living room. "Mr. Thompson, a complaint was filed yesterday claiming that you threatened a neighbor with your service weapon. The complainant states you approached her property while armed and made verbal threats." David sat perfectly still. "That's completely false. Can you tell us where you were yesterday between 4 and 6 p.m.? I was at work until 5:30. Then I stopped at the grocery store on Madison Avenue. Got home around 6:15. I have receipts, security camera footage from my house showing exactly when I arrived, and my office can verify I was there." Detective Rodriguez was taking notes. "The complainant states you've been harassing her for weeks, making threats, using your position to intimidate her. Detective, may I show you something?" David pulled out his laptop and opened the file he'd been building. He walked them through everything chronologically. The garage sale with full documentation of permits, the 4 false police reports with the responding officers' names and report numbers, the bogus code enforcement citation that was voided, the health department complaint that resulted in 0 violations, the emails Patricia had sent to the neighborhood, the HOA board meeting where she'd threatened him in front of witnesses, including the video recording. The 2 detectives looked at each other as David laid it all out. He'd organized everything like a case file because that's exactly what it was. Dates, times, witnesses, documentation, recordings, official reports from multiple city departments. "This is very thorough," Detective Kim said quietly. "I work in the DA's office. I know what documentation matters." Detective Rodriguez leaned back. "Mr. Thompson, we have to investigate every complaint. But between you and me, this has all the hallmarks of a false report, especially given this history." She gestured to the laptop screen. "We're going to need copies of all this." David had it all ready on a flash drive. He'd known this moment was coming. "There's something else," he said. "This complaint she filed yesterday? About me threatening her with my weapon? I need to be very clear about this. That's not just false. That's a felony. Filing a false report claiming a law enforcement officer threatened someone with a firearm? That's serious. We're aware," Detective Rodriguez said. "We'll be following up with the complainant." After they left, David called his supervisor at the DA's office and explained the situation. His supervisor was quiet for a moment, then said, "Document everything and send it to me. If she's filing false reports about you threatening people with your service weapon, that's not just harassment. That could destroy your career if anyone believed it. Already documented. Sending it now." "Good. Let me make some calls." Monday morning, David was at his desk when he got a call from Detective Rodriguez. "Lieutenant Thompson, I wanted to update you. We interviewed Patricia Henderson yesterday. She maintained her story until we showed her the documentation you provided. Then she changed her story 3 times. We also pulled her phone records. She's made 17 calls to 911 and various city departments about you in 3 weeks. 17. We're charging her with filing false police reports. Multiple counts. The DA's office is handling it, so you'll probably hear about it through your channels." David thanked her and hung up. Then he sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. It was over. Actually, over Tuesday, Patricia received a visit from the police. This time, she was the one being investigated. David watched from his window as she was served with papers. She came out of her house screaming at the officers, who remained professional and calm. The HOA board sent out an email to all residents explaining that Patricia had been removed from all positions due to violations of the harassment policy. They apologized for not addressing the issue sooner and announced new policies to prevent any single person from wielding that kind of unchecked power again. David's phone started buzzing with text, messages from neighbors, some apologizing for not standing up sooner, others thanking him for finally stopping her reign of terror. Jennifer sent him a message that just said "finally," with about 20 exclamation points. Wednesday afternoon, David saw a real estate sign go up in Patricia's yard. Her husband, a quiet man David had only seen a handful of times, looked exhausted and embarrassed as the realtor hammered in the post. Frank stopped by that evening with a 6-pack of beer. They sat on David's back porch and watched the sunset. "Her husband's a decent guy," Frank said. "Works in accounting. Keeps to himself. I feel bad for him. Yeah, this couldn't have been easy on him. He told me they're moving in with her sister 2 states over, getting away from all of this. The legal fees, the court case, the neighborhood knowing what she did. It's too much." David took a sip of his beer. "I didn't want this to happen. I just wanted to have a garage sale and live my life." "I know, but you did what needed to be done." She wasn't going to stop on her own. Over the next few weeks, David watched Patricia's house sell quickly. The new owners were a young couple with a baby. They seemed nice. The husband came over to introduce himself, and David welcomed them to the neighborhood. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia pleaded guilty to 3 counts of filing false police reports in exchange for probation, community service, and a fine. No jail time, but a criminal record that would follow her forever. The HOA implemented new rules. No single person could file more than 2 complaints per month without board approval. All complaints had to go through a review process. And most importantly, Harassment of any kind would result in immediate removal from any HOA position and potential legal action. 2 months after the garage sale that started everything, David was sitting on his front porch on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful. Kids were riding bikes. People were walking dogs. Someone down the street was having their own garage sale and nobody was calling the police. Jennifer walked by with her kids and stopped to chat. You know, this feels like a different neighborhood now. People are actually talking to each other. Coming outside. Not afraid anymore. That's good, David said. You saved this place, you know. We were all so beaten down we couldn't see a way out. I just documented what was happening. The system did the rest. After she left, David thought about his mom and how this whole thing started with her belongings spread out on his driveway. She would have found the whole situation ridiculous and probably would have handled Patricia with kindness and patience. But she also would have been proud that he stood up to a bully using the law, using documentation, and using patience instead of anger. That was the real victory. Not that Patricia was gone, but that he'd handled it the right way. His phone buzzed. It was Officer Davis. Hey, Lieutenant, saw the case got resolved. Good job handling that situation with professionalism. Drinks on me next time we run into each other. David smiled and texted back his thanks. Then he went back to his coffee and his newspaper, enjoying the quiet morning in his neighborhood. No sirens, no accusations. No drama, just a regular Saturday morning. Exactly what he'd wanted all along.